to go on that timetable.
Just kind of open that to them. or
Sure.
they already-
I know we have their.
Okay.
Thank you.
What do you mean? No. No, he's talked about it in February, or he's gonna talk about the timetable.
Streets, numbers.
Oh, okay. Oh, there he is. Okay. I'm sorry, you're the only one missing.
I'm here.
Okay, I will now call this meeting of the Sweetwater City Council to order. I'm going to ask Chief Madden to do the invocation and Councilman Castro to lead us in the pledges.
Would you pray with me, please? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day, for the sunshine, for the blessings that we enjoy from your hand. We thank you so much for this city, for the council members here. We pray that you will be with them through their decision-making this morning, that you will help them to do the best things for the city, and that we will always strive to live our lives close to you and following your word. Forgive us of our sins. Help us to all be good examples to those around us of how Christians should behave. These things we pray in Jesus' blessed name. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, we'll now move to item 4, which is discuss, consider, and act upon approval of minutes for meeting held on December 8th and December 22nd.
I move to be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting will be closed to in-person attendance by the public. A temporary suspension of certain provisions of the Open Meetings Act to allow telephone and video conferencing public meetings has been granted by Governor Greg Abbott. These actions are being taken to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 by avoiding meetings that bring people into group settings in accordance with Section 418.016 of the Texas Governmental Code. At this time, do we have any callers who wish to comment or emails that need to be read? None? Okay. We now have the swearing in of Brian Sheridan for the Chief of Police.
I, Brian Sheridan, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of the City of Sweetwater, Texas, and the state of Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
Congratulations, Brian.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Mayor, if I can say a few words, please.
Yes, sir.
We're happy that Chief Sheridan now, Chief, that sounds good, pretty good, doesn't it? The Chief Sheridan is on board with us now. The process that we went to get to this point was very extensive and very thorough. And Brian just rose to the top of the class. And so we're proud to have him here. We look forward to many great things of him being our Chief of Police. There's a lot of good things that are going to come from that, a lot of changes that need to be made in the department that as a leader he's going to be able to come in and show us a new way to lead the department here in Sweetwater. While I have everybody's attention, I also want to thank Lieutenant Counts for his stepping up to the plate and really doing a great job as our interim chief, keeping things going. And Matt, we want to thank you for your leadership as well. So thank you. Mr. Mayor, that's all I had.
Okay. We'll now move to item 6A, which is discuss, consider, and act upon approval of the quarterly investment report for the quarter ending December 31st, 2020. Any questions of Patty?
I move approval of the report.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried and approved. Now move to item 6B, which is discuss, consider, and act upon adoption of a resolution designating the Sweetwater Reporter as the official city newspaper for publications required by state law or the city charter. Any questions of Patty? Do I have a motion?
I have a motion, we accept the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried and approved. Now read the resolution into the record. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Sweetwater, Nolan County, Texas, designating the Sweetwater Reporter as official newspaper for the City of Sweetwater for a one-year term to expire on December 31st, 2021. Okay. We'll now move to item 6C, which is discuss, consider, and act upon an ordinance ordering an election of the qualified voters of the City of Sweetwater to be held on May 1st, 2021 for the purpose of electing a mayor at large and 2 council members, precinct 1 and 3 of said city.
Move adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried and approved. Now read the ordinance into the record. An ordinance of the City of Sweetwater ordering a municipal election to be held on May 1st, 2021 for the purpose of electing a mayor and 2 city council members of said city and providing details related to the holdings of such election. Okay, we'll now move to item 6D, which is discuss, consider, and act upon the reappointment of Mr. Matt Counts, Mrs. Jackie McCoy, Ms. Stacy Bowles, and Mr. Jeff Allen, whose terms will expire December 1st, 2020, to the Pioneer City County Museum Board of Directors.
But one question, do these folks attend all of the meetings regularly?
Becky's saying yes, they do.
Okay, thank you. I so move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried and approved. We'll now move to item 6E, which is discuss, consider, and act upon reappointment of Mr. Robert Piper and Mr. Jackie Trent, and appointment of Miss Wendy Riley to the Sweetwater Cemetery Board, whose terms will expire January 31st, 2023. Any questions of Russell Jones?
I make a motion, we accept the appointments, the reappointments.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried and approved. Now move to item 6F, which is discuss, consider, and act upon reappointment of Mr. Larry Ludlam, whose term will expire February 2023 to the Sweetwater Nolan County Municipal Auditorium Board.
Move we make this reappointment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carried and approved. We'll now move to item 6G, which is discuss, consider, and act upon interlocal agreement between the City of Sweetwater, Nolan County Hospital District to allow for the hospital district to locate a fence structure and in-ground pole cement supports in city street right-of-way to accommodate an outdoor recreation area for public benefit. Any questions of Dana?
Is the fence already built?
The poles are already in the ground.
Poles are up, yeah.
I move we approve the interlocal agreement.
Second.
We have a second?
Second.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried and approved. Okay, we will now move to item 6H, which is discuss, consider, and act upon a resolution of support for an affordable seniors rental housing development project at 1105 East Broadway Street, named Sweetwater Station, in the city of Sweetwater, Texas. Any questions of Dana?
it's okay, I just wanted to kind of introduce this a little
Yes,
bit, Mayor. We have Ryan Garcia with JES DevCo. They're the developer for this proposed development. He's prepared to provide some information to Mayor and Council this morning on this project. I would just state that, it's a project that would be partially paid for by tax credits through the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. I think we've seen these types of projects before. Been funded some, been funded, maybe not funded some other ones. Anyway, it's a private investment into our community. What Ryan is going to show you here is a preliminary site plan for the project, subject to change, given permit reviews and so forth, so keep that in mind as he's providing that information. But I would just introduce Ryan Garcia with JES DevCo to provide some information to those that are in attendance for this project.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. We got a quick presentation put together for y'all, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have along the way.
You could try that and point it back this way.
Just send it back to the beginning really quick. We're getting there, I'm sorry. Here we go. So the development we are proposing is a 48-unit, age-restricted senior housing complex called Sweetwater Station. We'll run through just a quick overview of the presentation. The company name is JES Holdings. It's a vertically integrated real estate company with 4 different arms. We are long-term holders of the properties that we invest in. I'm on the JES DevCo side, which handles the development of the properties themselves. We also have related entities of Fairway Construction, which will do the construction of the development, Fairway Management, which will manage it, and Affordable Equity Partners, which will be the investor in the syndicator of the tax credits. So this structure really shows that we are long-term holders and we are invested in the community. We're not trying to build something really quick and sell it off. When we build and invest in a community, we're here for the long term. It's just a quick overview of some of the experience of our company. Most of them, the related entities, have 20 to 30 years experience in the affordable housing industry. So here's a quick little summary of some of our Texas portfolio. Probably have a total of several hundred properties throughout the Midwest and Southeast, with a big chunk being in Missouri and Georgia. Here are just some highlights from our Texas portfolio. Here is one Settlement Estates in Bastrop, Texas, 770 garden style senior units. Another development, you can see this one is a elevator service building. Skipped over one. This one in Salado, Texas. Here is one in fairly recently completed one in Crandall, Texas. This is going to be the model that we're basing it off of, a 3-story elevator service building. Forgive my math, I realize the numbers don't add up to 48 units. But it will be 15 one-bedroom units and 33 two-bedroom units, just like we're having here. Here's the most recently completed development in Boulevarde, Texas, Comal County, outside of San Antonio. And here are some features of the specific community we're looking at here. As you can see, the development will be located at 1105 East Broadway Street, where the current High Torque building is. We're looking at an L-shaped lot at the moment to fit our 48 units on. Here is a conceptual site plan that our architects put together. We're looking at a 3-story building. As you can see, building is kind of L-shaped, tucked away into the back corner. We've got parking running through the front, and we have the L-shaped access to allow for emergency vehicle access. Plenty of parking. Looking at, again, 15 one-bedroom units, 33 two-bedroom units, 50 parking stalls. Just, again, another overview of the property. It will be an age-restricted. Everyone in the property will need to be 55 plus. I know there are some exemptions for 80%, but we're going to have everyone in the household must be aged 55 or older. We're going to have our 50 surface parking spaces. All our hallways and common areas will be air conditioned, so everything will be enclosed. That'll be over 10,000 square feet of conditioned common space. Overall density will be 33.8 units per acre. And there will be amenities throughout the building, including a fitness area, library, the leasing office, community kitchen, and general congregation area once once that's safe. The program we will be using to help finance the development will be the 9% low-income housing tax credit. Given its name, it's often confused with Section 8. That is not the case at all. What this program does, it is used to help finance the construction itself. And by helping to finance the construction, it lowers the overall debt load on the project, allowing us to charge lower rents. Tenants are still going to be responsible for their own rents, so any syndication and sale of the tax credits is going for the construction, not to subsidize any sort of tenant rent. Here's just a quick overview of what our income bands are going to look like. We will have tenants who fall between the 30, 50, and 60% income band range, with a majority of them being in the 60% income range. As you can see here, since these are elderly individuals and couples, there will be some units where those who just have Social Security will be able to live in the development, but a majority of them will need to have other sources of income in order to qualify to live here. Here's just a quick schedule of our proposed rents we're looking at right now. Happy to go over those in any more detail if y'all would like. Again, we're gonna have our 15 one-bedrooms, approximately 725 square feet per unit, 33 two-bedrooms, one-bath unit, 880 square feet. 4 units will be at that 30% AMI range, which is the lowest AMI range. We will have 10 units at the 50% and 33 units at the 60% and 1 market rate unit in there. All of the units will have a full kitchen with Energy Star appliances. It's going to be very energy efficient. We understand that we need to build these as green as possible to help the residents save money on utilities. There will be in-unit washer dryer and carpet and LVT flooring throughout. Here's a sample of the community area from one of our other properties. There will be the air-conditioned corridors and hallways. There'll be lounge and areas for the residents to interact and socialize. We'll have the library there. We'll have the exercise center, a computer lab, and the leasing center. We really believe that this project will bring quality, safe, affordable senior housing to Sweetwater. A benefit of this project is that it will have a positive impact on the tax base, and it will not have any impact on the school system, and it will bring more housing affordability to Sweetwater overall. We are a private entity, so we are not seeking a tax abatement on this, and given the name, it sounds like there would be any sort of tax abatement, but there is not. This property will be 100% on the tax rolls. Just what we believe are generally reasons to support this development and the resolution of support for the project. We've got great access to I-20. It brings more rooftops into the city, which will help spur commercial development. It's right across the street from the existing strip mall, so that can be a more customer base for that area. It's going to help with the housing needs of Sweetwater residents, and it's going to enhance the tax base without putting any additional strain on the school system. Here's just a quick rough schedule we put together. Last Friday, January 8th, we made our initial pre-application to TDHCA for an allocation of tax credits. The final application is going to be due March 1st. We're working through that process right now. Part of that is the resolution that y'all have before you right now. End of July is when TDHCA will announce their award list. Between August and December, we'll be working with the city on our permitting process, getting all our approvals. Late December will be our closing with TDHCA on the land. January 2022 is when we'll start construction. We're going to start our pre-leasing activities in October. January 2023 is when we should complete construction. And because of our pre-leasing activities, we're hoping to have 100% occupancy by February of 2023. And just last would be closing with the company motto, where we really do believe we want to develop, build, manage, and invest in quality housing where our families would be proud to live. I'll be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you address how competitive the applications are for the tax credit?
The applications are very competitive. Based on everything we've seen so far, it looks like this site will score very well. We should find out either by the end of the week, early next week, where the site scores in relation to all the other sites that are considered rural in Region 2, and that's going to be kind of the major decision point Once we find that out, that will give us a very good idea of where we stand, getting this into full application for March 1st, and then we'll find out ultimately by July if the project is funded or not.
Thank you.
A question for you.
Yes, sir.
You did emphasize that it would be on the tax roll. Many of these type of projects I have seen across the state use a tax exempt entity to actually own the property and then lease back the management to the developer or a related company. Are any of your other projects in Texas owned by a tax exempt entity?
No, they are not. They're all privately owned and 100% on the tax rolls. I do know the situation you're talking about. That's typically much more common in the 4% deals, but this one, again, will be 100% on the tax roll and owned by a private entity.
Okay, and you promise and vow this will never be a tax exempt property?
Yes, sir.
Well, I appreciate that, but I guess one other comment. I don't think it is the city council's responsibility or charge to make recommendations or have resolutions of support for any industry, whether it's a new restaurant or a new apartment complex or any type of a new business. I don't think it's the business of the city council to support against or in favor of any private industry. And I would oppose this resolution.
Ryan, is this seeking of support from the local governing bodies? Is that kind of considered part and parcel of the application process?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, if this, because a resolution does count for a very high amount of the points needed to score, without the resolution, the project will not happen.
Okay, thank you. I move adoption of the resolution of support.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried and approved. Now read the resolution into the record. A resolution for the City Council of the City of Sweetwater, Texas for resolution of support for an affordable renting housing located at 1105 East Broadway Street named Sweetwater Station.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move to item 7, which is the street project workshop.
Mr. Mayor, we have Mr. Sage Diller, PE with EHD. We'll let him talk about this topic. This topic has been discussed before with the council. We've been undergoing a lot of street studies, or a significant amount of street studies over the last several years. And it's kind of all come to a head right now. There's two parts to this presentation. One is the project itself, and then you got to find a way to pay for it, right? So Andrew Friedman with Samco, our financial consultants, will present on the money part of it, how this would be paid for. It's approximately $24 million proposed project, and so it's not nickels, and you're not finding that kind of money in the couch seats. It's gonna take significant investment on behalf of the council and the community to make this a reality. So we'll go ahead and get started with Sage portion, and then we'll go on to Andrews.
And Chief Sheridan, if your children would like to go to school today, they're more than welcome to
I
leave.
think that's a great idea.
Because this may take a while.
You can do it. Mayor, before he leaves, can I take a picture up there with you?
You bet. You bet.
Oh,
This presentation is going to be really good. I promise you. You're going to get to miss it.
Okay, good.
They can sleep at school just as well as they can sleep in your presentation.
That's true. That's true.
Up there.
Oh, up there.
Where the where the seal is?
Best smile I've ever done.
Thank you.
I'm not leaving.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where's everybody going?
He's used to.
Okay, we'll get started on this presentation. As Mr. Vela mentioned, this discussion has been going on for multiple years. You know, pavement condition, street condition is an important item and topic of interest for many cities, and they're difficult to fund. They're costly, but it's also important to the community, and they generally garner lots of support. First, I'd like to say also that the city Public Works Department's done a great job of maintaining the streets that the city has, but there have not been any substantial capital improvement projects for street rehabilitation in quite some time. And so back in 2017, this process began, discussion as far as this, the phase 1 of this report. So we were authorized to begin the visual inspection of approximately 15.5 miles of street throughout the city. It was a visual inspection and evaluated the ride quality and function, the existing pavement or the utility replacement that were identified, mainly the crossings of the streets that would be recommended for replacement if the street were to be rehabilitated, and then also the preliminary estimate of projected construction costs were developed. Okay, so this again is a summary of the phase 1 evaluation. Summary here, we talked about the existing utilities and then the length of the project. Let's go to the next slide. Here's an overall map of what was evaluated, 15.5 miles throughout the city. Major collector streets and thoroughfares through town that get a lot of the local traffic. Those were identified. So it kind of encompasses the north and south sides of the town and is widespread throughout. Let's go on to the next one. So then once we evaluated phase 1 and presented that during, I believe, one of the budget retreats, we moved on into phase 2, and that was to refine the project a little bit more and gather some subsurface information that would then lead to being able to gather a better cost estimate and hopefully lead into ranking as far as priority of the streets and the projects. The next one. This slide indicates the locations of the geotech bores that were done throughout town. I believe there were 26 of them, widespread throughout to kind of garner what the existing condition or existing pavement structure looked like as far as pavement thickness and base material and then subgrade. So here is the table of the results. As you can see, indicates the depth of the hot mix paving and the base material. And throughout, what was found was that it was a pit run caliche material for the base, which is to be expected, locally sourced. It's not the most ideal material, but typically when these streets were built decades ago, that was the locally available material, and that was what was used. Then also there on the right-hand column is the subgrade soil type, which is typically kind of a red-brown clay sand, which was found to be consistent pretty throughout the project area. So then, once we took the information of what was found existing, the costs were updated. This is kind of a summary here of those results. A detailed cost summary was in the report, but this is a summary. Shows that with the construction looking at about $22 million. You've got the professional services fees, and then total costs we're looking at 23, almost 24 million. And then one thing for consideration would be the cost escalation for construction over a multi-phased project, which is generally 3 to 5%, something like that. So the overall total right now of what is being discussed is about $25 million for this 15.5 miles of street rehabilitation and utility rehabilitation. The next step would be the priority ranking. So what we did is go through the results, the core results, and come up with a criteria as far as typical base thickness, typical hot mix section, and then we ranked it based upon the core results. And so that's kind of how it broke out as far as priority ranking based upon existing condition and then recommendation for replacement. One thing that this does not include would be city input as far as local knowledge of traffic patterns and utilization. That what we're hoping it would be kind of the next phase of applying that local knowledge to ranking the streets as far as utilization throughout town. But that's these are the rankings based upon the existing condition. So let's go on to the next one. As mentioned, as this project moves forward, city needs, traffic types and counts, and then how the phasing of the project or the budget alignment would work best for the city. Obviously, we're talking about a substantial project, and we'll get into the financial side, and Andrew, that's his opportunity to identify means and methods for the city to funding a project like this. So this is just a typical breakdown. This is the project in 5 phases. We have, since this slide was developed, we've talked about it may be more in the city's interest to fund it in 3 phases, which would be more like $8 million packages. All that will be evaluated in the financial discussion. But this is 5 packages over a 2-year time frame. One thing that Andrew discussed would be more of a once the debt is issued, I think there's a kind of a 3-year time frame. So if you looked at it from $8 million packages, that would accomplish the work in about 3 phases. So on the next one, please. Yes. So any questions on the engineering side or what is the reports have identified or anything like that? If not, then we'll move on to the financial side of it.
Where you were rating the streets, you had some streets that a portion of it would fall in one category, and then another portion of the street would fall in a different category. When you did the actual street repair, you'd do the whole street all at once, correct?
Yes, sir. That would make the most sense during construction. You get economies of scale from a contractor not having to mobilize around different parts of town. If it made the most sense from a construction standpoint, construction cost standpoint, that entire street would be included. Yes, sir. Now, there are a couple of streets that are very long in length. We may look at breaking those up into different packages if there is a break point that makes sense to the project. All right.
Sage, one quick question.
Okay.
While we're out there and digging holes all over town to improve these streets, talk to us a little bit about the lines, the water utility lines, and the sewer lines that we can take advantage of that time frame to upgrade those.
Yes, sir. So obviously, before making substantial improvements in the roadway, we would like to make sure that the utilities are in good condition underneath there. That's the last thing any of us want to do is go, repave a roadway and then have a failing utility shortly thereafter. So we looked at some of the historical maps and worked with the utilities department trying to identify the age and condition of existing utilities. And we've included those costs, what was estimated, or the length of replacement that would be recommended in combination of one of these projects or in advance of one of these projects, how that best worked out. But that would be the intent, would be to make sure that we're not building, or rehabilitating roadway on top of poor utilities.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for the opportunity.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, council members. You all have the hard copy here. Andrew Friedman with Samco Capital Markets. As Sage and Mr. Vella have already told you, we've got what we call a tax rate impact analysis. So we've identified, or EHT has identified all of the projects and has a rough cost. And one of my questions, I guess, for Sage, talking about 3 to 5% increases in construction cost annually, is that factored into that $24 million number at this point?
The $25 million, yes, includes that cost escalation.
Assuming a 2-year construction period, though?
That's correct.
Okay, because what I'm looking at here, and this is just a first blush at a potential capital improvement plan here for these streets, would be issuing the first series of debt later this year and the last series of debt in 2027. And so in that scenario, we've got some potential inflationary cost that's not considered in this. So it might actually need to be a little bit more, but I want to get y'all just an understanding of how this is going to impact the taxes. There's a lot more work, obviously, to be done in terms of prioritizing the streets, coming up with a funding plan that makes sense. So this will change certainly over time. But one of the things that we look at here is the city has a maintenance and operations tax rate. That goes to fund your operations generally for the city. There's a second tax rate that the city does not implement that most cities do have, called an interest and sinking tax rate. And that's a debt service tax rate that's levied specifically to pay for debt service. Can't be used to pay for operations, to make other improvements. It only goes to pay for debt service. All of our debt that's outstanding now is paid for from our utility revenues. And so this street project, whether you issue bonds or certificates of obligations or any other type of security, will need to be paid for from your ad valorem tax rate. And so what this analysis looks at is how many pennies are we going to have to levy in addition to the M&O tax rate that we already have in order to support these projects. And so that's what we're getting to this morning. One more consideration for you. When we issue debt for our utility system, we issue certificates of obligation. And as you all recall, because we've done this several times over the years, we put a notice of intention, the council adopts a notice of intention resolution, 46 days after which you can then entertain bids and actually sell that debt and lock in an interest rate. That doesn't go to the voters for their approval. For this project, you could issue those certificates of obligation through that same mechanism. Each time we go to borrow, you adopt a notice of intention resolution. We publish in the paper the council's intention to borrow $8 million, whatever that number may be, before we go to market and actually sell that debt. Alternatively, we can take this off. Alternatively, we can hold a general obligation bond election where we go to the voters and we would go for the entire package generally of what these streets are going to cost at one of the 2 uniform bond election dates, which would be in May or in November of each year, for them to approve and authorize our ability to borrow up to that amount for whatever we're setting out. And in this case, it would be for street improvements. So for this, either way, the analysis that we're looking at here, this could be certificates of obligation, this could be general obligation bonds. That's a decision for you as a governing body to make over the coming weeks, months, or years as we further consider this project. The borrowing rates are the same. It's just going to the voters for their input up front, or going and bringing this notice of intention to the voters each time we want to borrow money to support this project. So going back to the analysis, what we're looking at here, starting from left to right, you can see from the left side the fiscal year 2021 going all the way out to 2047. TAV is your taxable assessed value for the entire city. We've got the certified 2020 value of roughly $491 million. And since we don't have any existing debt, we're just looking at adding the debt service for each of these $8 million bond issues spaced 3 years apart roughly. And then going all the way to the far column, INS, that's the resulting INS tax rate, the number of INS pennies it would take to support the cumulative effect of all of these debt issuances. So you can see that we would start with, if you were to go to the voters or issue this debt in August of this year is what the assumption would be. We would have to, in this next budget year, you'd adopt your M&O rate as you normally would. You would also have to adopt an INS rate of 11.38 cents. Then when we issue that second piece of debt in $8 million in 2024, we would have to increase that INS tax rate to 21.27 cents. And then ultimately when we issue the last tranche of debt in 2027, that tax rate would go up to 32 cents. And right now we're levying, I think, roughly 54.4 cents in M&O tax rate, so that would have your tax rate up around 86 cents by the year 2027 in order to support these street projects. In addition, on this analysis, we just made a simple assumption that we were going to grow the tax base at roughly 3% per year for 5 years, and then assume that the tax base isn't going to grow any further beyond that. Included there on the far right side, a taxable assessed value history. We've been growing roughly at 4.5% annually over the last decade. Certainly we expect to continue to grow at some rate beyond 5 years from now. That just helps us to come up with what we consider a very conservative estimate in terms of that tax impact of this. And then ultimately, as you're considering all of this, the ultimate question is, what's the impact going to be on me as a homeowner? And so that bottom right table, the homeowner impact, shows you based on the maximum tax rate, which is 32.18 cents in 2033, how much would you expect your property taxes to have increased in order to support that based on some different home values? And so a $150,000 home could expect ultimately a $482 annual increase in their property taxes in order to support this full $24 million bond package as we're contemplating here. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that's a lot of information for you all. That much debt is certainly a lot to take on. I would suggest whether you're going to the voters for that authorization for the full package or considering issue certificates of obligation, when you get that authorization from the voters or issuing COs, we're not committing to issuing all of this regardless of its impact. And so as we're going through this project, if you issue the first tranche of debt and it's taking time to get through that, or we're not getting the growth that we're hoping to get, there's nothing that says you have to keep issuing the debt moving forward regardless of your circumstance. So you're getting that authorization from the voters, but it's not forcing you to issue that debt in perpetuity. We can certainly work with when we're issuing the debt, and so there's a lot of flexibility in how you approach this bond program ultimately. This is just really a first blush at looking at what this would cost. It's one thing to see that, great, let's replace all of our streets. It's another thing to say, okay, well, this is what it's actually going to take, and that could cause some heartburn. And for all of the street CIP projects, or certainly many, many cities are exactly your same position, it always comes with a price tag that's about like this. And so that just is what it is. Your revenue sources to pay for this certainly is an INS tax rate. We don't have many other coffers to pull from, any other sources of revenue. Right now, you've got a sales tax that you use for property tax reduction. One thing that I just throw out there for just consideration simply, some places, especially if you were to move forward with this bond program and you put $24 million worth of new streets in, how are we going to maintain those to really increase the useful life of those streets, so that we're not spending all this money just to have them failing, in 15 years, is to potentially reallocate that sales tax to street maintenance. Is just a thought for you all. That might not work whatsoever, but it's another tool out there that might help you keep the useful life of these streets going for many years to come. You've gotten a lot of utility out of your streets now, but if you're considering putting this much infrastructure down, worth looking at. So I'm happy to answer any questions, David or Patty. If I've left anything out, let me know. I know there's kind of a lot of information here.
Andrew, on the bond election, what happens if the voters say no? What happens after that?
Very good point. So the legislature changed a few years ago. It used to be if you held a bond election and the voters said, no, they vote down your bond proposition for streets, you could turn around and issue COs if you so wanted to. Politically, that might get you in a bit of hot water. The legislature came back and said if you fail a bond election, you are prohibited by law for issuing COs for that same project for 3 years. And so that is one of the consequences of that, and just food for thought. If you are wanting to proceed with this, as I said, you can have a bond election 2 times a year. May 1st would be the next bond election, and then you've got your November election. You have to call the bond election no sooner than 90 days prior to that election, no later than 78 days. So you've got a very small 2-week window, which would, if you wanted to proceed on a May bond election, taking this to the voters, you would be calling that bond election at your February 8th council meeting. So there's not a ton of time either for this May election. I would also say that as you're considering whether you hold it in May or November, the time that you would sell this debt would generally be the same time you're setting your tax rate and adopting your budget. And so you would be going to market regardless of whether you get approval from the voters in May or November in the August timeframe. So we're generally recommend proceeding with a bond election in the May. That way you're not having to wait, another 6 or 8 months in order to do that. The reason we want to issue in August is we get our certified values at the end of July. You're setting your budget at that time, so we're able to target the tax rate that we want based on a known value for the city, rather than assuming that we're going to get that 3% growth and we kind of target our bond payments based upon an assumption. We'd rather do that based on cold hard fact, and so generally we look to sell bonds sometime in that August-September time frame. So if you got permission from the voters in May, you'd be moved straight into a bond issuance. You'd get that money in September, October to start the project. If we got that authorization in November, we would generally wait until the following, this would be 2022, August, September timeframe to issue that debt.
Any questions? Andrew, for let's just say a May election, the council next month calls a May election for $8 million for the whole portion of it, but our first phase is about $8 million or so.
Yes.
Do we have to know which streets are going to be
repaired
at that point?
The bond proposition, and your bond attorneys will write this, but these are all city-owned, city-maintained streets. It'll be a single proposition for whatever amount you wish to call it for, and it'll be for street improvements. And there's a reason why we do recommend keeping it, and I don't want to say vague, but keeping our options open, because as your streets, some of those priorities may shift. We don't want to include in that language specific streets that we're going to tackle with this bond financing, because once those proceeds are received and you've issued that debt, you're locked into whatever you said you were going to do with those bond proceeds. And so if we keep it broad with street improvements, the city can continue to reassess, move money around towards street improvements. You couldn't go do city hall improvements with those proceeds. But if we say, X, Y, and Z street, and then ultimately Y street doesn't need the level of work that we anticipated, you've got money left over, you can't spend it anywhere else. And so we try to keep that broad-based within the legal limits, and your bond counsel knows how to do that. It's certainly done all over the state that way.
Could the council issue COs for phase one and then subsequently
Absolutely.
go to the voters for GOs?
Yes, I mean, you can do it really in any order whatsoever. If you wanted to issue COs to get the project started, and then go to the bond, take it to take it to the citizens in a bond election a year later for a different amount, you could certainly do that. You could mix and match it. It really becomes a just consideration for you all. The borrowing rate is the same because the CO and a bond are both going to be secured by your property tax base and by your underlying credit rating that we've already established. And so it's just really more of a political consideration, I would say, whether you want to take this to your voters or leave this to the petition that we go through with each CO that we issue, where they have the right to petition a project.
And right now, our interest in sinking rate is 0, is it not?
You have no interest in sinking rate. That's correct.
There's clearly, as somebody drives up and down Hoyt Street every day, there's clearly a need to do something. As Hoyt Street degenerates into a goat path, certainly a lot to consider and the approaches that we have to take. I personally think a project this big, we need to present for the voters. And I know we cannot take any action today, but I would express opinion for a bond election for the whole amount.
Or do we go with the 5 million of us doing it and then show them 2 or 3 streets that are actually getting fixed out of the deal? I mean, that's just, or do we take it all to them?
As I said, the whole thing, I'd be concerned if we issued COs and then did a bond election, that it might even be harder to pass that bond election because the voters might say, well, didn't you just borrow a whole bunch of money?
Yeah.
But then again, it might be a good selling point too. You know, if they see a real dramatic difference made in one street.
Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that. I would say largely, I've not seen a mix and match of COs and bonds. It would be more a circumstance of frankly, most cities, because their street improvement is, we look at things want versus need. Street improvements often fall in that need category, and so are generally easier to do as a certificate of obligation. This is a more unique circumstance because you're talking about a very large number and a very large tax increase that I would personally recommend taking to your voters because it's going up 60% on your tax rate overall is not going to be missed as somebody's looking at their property tax bill annually, and that's just a large number to bite off.
Well, hopefully the voters are mindful of what happened in Abilene and the kind of situation they found themselves in, where their streets were in horrible disrepair, and they had a real struggle generating support for desperately needed street improvements. So hopefully there's awareness of that.
Any other questions? Thanks, sir.
You're welcome. I'm just going to take one moment, and Sage is here as well. Planning to be back here on February 8th anyway. The Texas Water Development Board reached out. They're going to be taking our Clean Water State Revolving Fund and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund applications for our utility projects for their approval on January 28th. We expect to get a green light to proceed at that time, and so we'll be back on February 8th to begin that process of issuing those COs for those projects that we've been working on for probably year and a half at this point. Do have the good fortune of telling you all you got $913,000 and change of grant money, what they call principal forgiveness, on that project, which is great news. So that borrowing has decreased a little bit. We're getting some free money from the state and federal government on the utility project. So see you in roughly a month there.
Thanks, sir.
You're welcome.
No city manager?
Not this
Okay, okay. Get a motion for adjournment.
I make a motion we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Good time.
Pretty good time.